Um, Hello, everyone. We're just coming to the start of our live-on-air broadcast tonight, which is on Christian ecology. Stuart Manins is, you can probably see him in the film strip, but he's just about to leave and he'll come back in. So, Stuart, just close your windows off entirely, close your machine down, and then come back in, and it should be fine. Max, welcome along tonight to you. You're being broadcast from France, and it's really great that you're able to be in here with us. Now, for those of you that have come in and are watching in the participants in the film strip tonight, you've got an opportunity to feed live questions in to any one of the participants, and the way to do that, you may need to find a little group up in the top right hand screen. This doesn't apply to Stuart or to Max, but for the ones that are watching, they'll be able to see a little group of 9 dots, and if they toggle that around, they've got to hover their mouse towards the upper right of their screen, and it should bring up the Q&A chat, and you can feed your questions in as we're talking. To begin tonight, I need to bring an apology from Professor Mark Orams. He's very unwell with the flu. He's laid low, and I was speaking to him just 10 minutes ago, and he really does apologise. We will reschedule Mark to give his perspective on a Christian ecology in a month or two's time. And we'll have some other participants in the panel discussion. But meantime, we've got Max and Stuart, and I'm going to bring up our first slide for the evening, and it's actually on what is a definition of ecology. And I think it is composed from 2 Greek words. The Greek word for oikos, which is household, and logos, the logi, if you like, which is study. So it's the study of the household. And you might think, well, that isn't quite what you understood by the word ecology. I copied the definition of ecology straight out of Wikipedia, and it's there as the interdisciplinary study of interactions among organisms and their environment. And that actually is the study of the household. That word oikos is the household of the whole inhabited world. All the creatures, all the things that live in the inhabited world. And a beautiful shot of the planet Earth in a kind of a nighttime, twilight nighttime phase, and you can see parts of the globe lit up by cities with huge amounts of light pouring out from them. So humans and all sorts of other animals, and from microbiology through to the great lions and tigers on the African and Indian plains and so on, all of this is the study of interactions amongst organisms and their environment, and it includes the human animal. So without any further ado, I'm going to toss a question towards Max. Max, as you are an engineer who spent a lot of time looking at social responsibility, what's your take on how we as a human species are doing in terms of looking after the ecology of planet Earth?
As I see it, we're failing in many ways. We are very slow to listen to scientific advice on the effect of global warming. We are very slow to influence, perhaps, companies in particular, but also countries on their dealing with local environments such as forests where animals are living, continuing to cut down trees. So really not doing very well as a human race.
Not doing very well. Stuart, what's your take on how we're doing in terms of environmental impact on our planet?
Well, I have to speak from a view that's further back from the immediacy of Max's. I can only go on what I read. And what I read, particularly from doing a Coursera course about this, is that we're not doing well, and we're not responding with a kind of sensitivity we ought to glaringly proved inadequacies in our relationship.
I think both of you are saying we're not doing well, and we're not doing well in obvious kinds of ways. We've got the picture of the tiger up there, but if we went, say, to the polar regions, and here we've got a bear, we're aware that global warming and climate change is melting the polar ice caps. It seems as if the kind of pollutant gases that we pump out have accelerated some of the effects. But who's listening? Do you think the politicians are listening as parts of the environment become more fragile?
I think the politicians are listening to the people, and until the majority of the people are expressing concern, they are not bothering.
Do you think they're listening more, Max, to the multinationals than the people, the oil companies and the like?
I think that too, that they're very strongly influenced from where money comes. And in the case of the multinationals, they're able to put lots of money into influencing governments and particularly ministers to do what they want for profit.
Right. What's your take on it, Stuart? Are our politicians making really very much progress on mitigating against the effects of environmental impact?
No, I don't think that's the case. But I think politicians are concerned more about popularity than a higher level of concern. I can be much more concerned about what's right and what ought to be done, even if it's inconvenient to me, than a politician can, because I haven't got any other motivation than from getting to something that's better, and they have a motivation of remaining in power.
Yeah, I guess that's in the nature of politics. I'm just aware, I'm looking at the fact that we've had 2, 3, 4 viewers coming in and out, so they may be wandering in and out. And if you would like, as a viewer, to submit a question or a comment, try moving your mouse around to the upper right-hand corner of the screen and just see whether you can toggle the question on. At present, you may be seeing something that is just advertising the YouTube channel and the Six Senses website. Close to that, there will be a toggle for you to be able to turn the live chat on. Just have a go, and if you've got a question, type it in. It'll take a few minutes for it to come up for us to see it. And if you've just joined us, we just note that Professor Mark Orams is unfortunately unwell tonight, and he'll join us again in a month or so's time. So Stuart and Max and I are looking at the kinds of questions that are to do with Christian understanding of ecology and sustainability. And so we've got these magnificent creatures in their habitats, and these habitats are under threat. It's as if somehow or other the household of the inhabited world is being attacked by one species. I'm not talking here about the impacts of climate change and how we may or may not have accelerated those effects. I'm talking here about just general pollution that comes out, and also the kind of greed that drives multinational companies. For example, the exploitation of the Amazonian rainforests. It seems as if governments are powerless against big business in certain kinds of environments. Max, engineers for social responsibility have looked at this, haven't they? Have you got any comments about that?
Well, certainly engineers for social responsibility are expressing great concerns about deforestation, about the TPP, the agreements that are being sorted in secret. The main concern being that it is in secret, so there's no opportunity other than through leaks to see what is being agreed between governments based on pressure from companies.
Yeah, these TPP negotiations have been too secret by far from a New Zealand perspective, because we've been assured that the details can't be made public because it might affect the various parts of the outcome, but things like Pharmac funding and so on have come under enormous pressure. And I think that's a very big cause for worry. Another aspect to this is that other countries are acting in isolation in relation to their dairy farming, whereas our dairy farming, which I think is moving more and more to a kind of environmental sustainability. Sure, not all dairy farmers have got there yet, but many have, and Fonterra and the other companies promote sustainability, which is to be encouraged. But I think that elsewhere, practices are very far from sustainability. Stuart, you did the Coursera course on how to change the world, and we looked quite specifically at some things like personal actions and responsibilities that we could take. You got any comment on that as we see these beautiful creatures and their environments under threat?
Well, I could, but I'd rather make another point first, if I may, and I'll phrase it in the shape of a question. You introduced in the last 5 minutes a new term, that's Christian ecology, rather than just ecology. Now, I'm very happy with the term ecology. I think I know what it means. But when you add the word Christian ecology, I see different kinds of meaning and interpretations that could be applied to what Christians have thought is reasonable ecology over the last few hundred years. Do you want to talk about that and tell me what you think Christian ecology is different from just ecology?
Yeah, sure. That's a really good introduction. In what way is a Christian ecology different from ecology? Yeah. Well, these are all related words. And before we had the science of ecology, that is the study of the interaction of organisms with their environment and one another, we actually had a Christian ecology. The Christian ecology is the thing that came first. This is not very well understood at all. It sprang from the way in which St. Paul used that Greek word oikos. Now, the Greek word oikos means household, and he meant it in terms of the whole household of God. All the people of the world, if you like, as he understood the world to be, in one basket. And it's out of that we have two words in the modern setting. One in the ancient setting, that's ecumenical. And that word ecumenical is very closely related to that word ecology. They have the same source. And the oikos in ecumenical meant all the churches and all the Christians together in the one basket of God. So that actually is the prior meaning of the oikos. When ecology developed as a subject, it was quite natural to pick up that idea of the oikos, the household of everything in the world. Does that make sense? That's the relationship between ecumenical and ecology. But there's also another word that we use in modern times, economy. And that too has sprung out of the same root, oikos. And so ecology, ecumenical, and economy are three words springing from the same Greek root. And you can see the kind of interconnectedness in some ways, because our economy is something that occurs in human societies and cultures, and that is got to do with sustaining standards by which we live. Our ecumenical relationships have to do with sustaining our standards as how Christians relate to one another, and our ecology has to do with sustainability of the whole natural order. So those three terms belong together, and if you put all of them into the one overall arching word, I think you would have the way in which we use stewardship as the concept today. Stewardship implies sustainability, and so ecology, ecumenical, and economy become part of the stewardship of the household of God, and stewardship leads naturally towards sustainability. I'll just stop sharing that screen for the time being, and let's just come back to checking out whether that's an understanding that you guys think is reasonable.
I think it's reasonable. Oh, sorry, you go on, Max.
I have any understanding of the Greek.
Sorry, Max, I didn't pick that up.
I'm just saying that it makes sense. I have no understanding of the Greek origins of words, but it seems to make sense to me.
Yep. Stuart.
I think it makes sense, and I like the original idea of ecos, the house, being the total concern for interrelated things. But I think back in the late Middle Ages, and even to my own early days, there were Christians that didn't have that interdependence, but saw the relationship between man and nature as one of dominating the other. And I think that's messed things up quite a bit. And I like the move theologically to go back to the original understanding of the whole house interrelated for the total good.
Yeah, just so. Let me share that screen again. You're absolutely right that if you went back in Christian history to roughly the time of the Protestant Reformation, there was a very strong Protestant belief in the domination of nature for economic ends. And because of that, the idea of sustainable stewardship simply flew out the door, if you like. With all due respect to the Presbyterians, Max, this was a development of the Presbyterian form of church government that put such a strong Puritan emphasis on work. And that wasn't just the Presbyterians in Scotland, but it was the whole Reformed movement springing up in various denominations throughout Europe. And so you see a belief arising that you are doing God's will by working to improve your lot, and you worked by exploiting what nature had to offer. So the rise of Protestantism is coterminous with the rise of capitalism. The two went hand in hand. And so you didn't have sustainability in the stewardship equation. What you had was exploitation. They weren't acting from a stewardship point of view, but acted by and large from the idea, how do you exploit nature? And of course this reached its zenith in the 18th century with the Industrial Revolution. And as the Industrial Revolution proceeds, you get worse and worse ecological consequences. Now, the first and foremost ecological consequence in that time was against children and women. Our species acted quite reprehensibly towards other members of the species. So it was considered desirable for increasing economic wealth that you had factories that burnt coal, used steam to drive engines, etc. And these factories had to have chimneys to take the soot away. And how could you clean the chimneys? You put boys, 4, 5, 6-year-old boys in to sweep the chimneys. And the factory owners, the mill owners, etc., had not the slightest compunction about exploiting a part of their own species to do this. So the average life expectancy of a chimney sweep in the 18th century was 12 years old, and the majority of them died of cancer of the scrotum because, of course, they never bathed, etc., and the soot and all the rubbish built up inside the skin of the scrotum. Even more cruel was the fact that they had to sweep these chimneys while they're still hot. So you're absolutely right. The rise of Protestantism also helped the rise of capitalism, and there was not the slightest shred of thought given for how you treat the environment. You simply set out to exploit the environment. Now, as opposed to this, in the Roman Catholic world, you had some of the great troubadours of nature. If you go back prior to the Industrial Revolution, you've got St. Francis of Assisi. And what a magnificent record he's got of the praise of nature and the need for a sustainability between the human species and all the animal species, and so on and so forth. So I think as Christianity developed, particularly around Protestantism, it got some very unhealthy attitudes towards stewardship and sustainability. Now, what's occurred since then is that in the 20th century, at the start of the 20th century, we started to see more and more Christians taking a different kind of tack. And it's almost as if some of them started to recover the Roman Catholic emphases of people like St. Francis and so on. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the Roman Catholic perspectives were 100% correct and Protestantism was 100% wrong. I'm not. There are all kinds of things bubbling away in here. But it is true that Protestantism and capitalism were unhealthily intertwined for a couple of centuries. Does that answer that question, Stuart?
Yes, it tells me that the Christian influence on ecology has been at times very bad and at other times very good. So it could be safer just to conduct our discussion in terms of ecology on its own. Christianity has or has not in the past helped.
Well, I think though that I'd like to to hold that word Christian in there, because I believe that Christians today, in terms of sustainability, have a role to play, and maybe a role that comes more naturally as an outworking of their faith. And that actually is the point of the slide. We're asking here, what can congregations do and individuals do to help the movement towards sustainability? So given that ecology has grown out of a kind of Christian understanding in the very ancient past, or the words are interrelated at any rate, I think it's altogether appropriate. We ask, what can individuals and congregations do? Max, as part of the Engineers for Social Responsibility, have you got any suggestions of what we might do to help it?
Well, it occurs to me that there are 4 points, 2 relating to congregations. A congregation can, in its own decisions, just keep the ecology in mind. And an example of that is locally with East Coast Bays. We're looking at replacing straight electric heaters with heat pumps, which is a more ecological use of energy rather than just churning out more heat. Another thing that a congregation can do is to support the work being done at denominational level. In our case, the Methodist Public Questions Committee, and what they're trying to do. I'm sure they appreciate the moral support of individual parishes and congregations, and need that support, otherwise they can feel that they're out on a limb. At the individual level, I think people can participate in local groups as a local activity that are working ecologically, if you like, sustaining bush, in my case, sustaining the ecology of a local park, and at the wider level can be supportive of groups worldwide like EVAS and Some of Us, that have huge influence because they get millions of people signing up on relevant petitions.
Would you like to just explain, Max, what you mean by EVAS?
EVAS is a worldwide group. It's driven from somewhere in the Americas. I'm not sure if it's Canada or USA, but it's got millions of members, if you can call them members. They use the collective input from members to decide what is important, and then they will run petitions and means of influencing governments on issues by getting millions of signatures on a petition, getting money in to put advertisements in newspapers and relevant places, to put pressure on governments to act responsibly.
Right, thanks for that, Max. Just by way of explanation, I think the heat pumps are already in the church hall at Trinity at Waiaki. I experienced their benefit this morning. It was lovely and warm as toast. So that's a positive.
That's excellent. That's happened since I left and came to France.
Right. Stuart, in your life now in a retirement village where you have a unit and a garden, do you think that it's practical to help other people to garden?
It's always practical to help other people. There's not great encouragement to, within the particular community that I'm in, to seek to take the expertise offered by the members. It's an organisational thing, and I've discussed this with management and said I think we're missing out if we don't exploit in the best possible way the goodwill that's there to share some of the jobs in the interests of being more efficient and helpful.
Yes, I know you'd raised that with me also, and I thought it was really a very good idea to get people in the village to be more active in terms of that. Now, I think that applies straight out into our local congregations. Because I'm a member at Trinity at Waiaki, I'm interested in what their group ecological outreach might be. Now, because Mark Orams is not well tonight, but we will explore with Mark subsequently his work at the Marine Education Resource Centre, MERC, at Long Bay. And there are a number of people that have been highly committed to setting that up, and I think that the area around Long Bay is now protected marine reserve. Across out in the Hauraki Gulf, you've had dozens, I think, of members of the congregation have either visited Tiri Matangi or gone over and planted trees on there in earlier days. Max has been active in the Centennial Park Committee and taking an interest in all the kinds of activities. Max lives on the border of that park. But I don't detect yet in the congregation a kind of a sustained approach to these ecological activities and concerns. Many of the congregation come from different parts of the North Shore and beyond. So it's really, I think, a question of a congregation building into its leadership structures the ability to ask some questions and put forward some possibilities for the leadership group to communicate out to the congregation. It could be, just for example's sake, that the congregation said, well, as a whole, we'll get involved with the cleanup of the beach at Waiaki. There's a move to looking at how to get rid of the mangrove infestation that's crept in. And that has crept in as a result of the activity in subdivisions since post-World War II. And I can think of the Dunedin Mornington congregation that got very involved in the cleanup of the Kaikorai Valley stream, and they made that an ongoing project for something like 20-25 years. So I do believe that congregations that have an interest in the environment and sustainability can get involved as a group. And of course, one of the byproducts of doing that kind of external to the church, if you like, but completely at one with the Christian message, is that you build fellowship, you build friendship, you start to interact in new ways. So my message for this evening would be something along the lines that congregational leaders or whatever the leadership group call themselves could have a look at this. Well, I'm aware that we've come to halfway, we've been in broadcast now for about 35 minutes, and we haven't had any questions feed through. So I begin to wonder whether some folks still don't know how to use the question and answer feed at this point. I think it's time to draw this evening's broadcast to a close, but I want to do a little bit of advertising for next week. As you know, I was leading worship at Waiaki Church today, and sitting in the congregation was Stuart McAdam, who's the Chief Executive Officer, the CEO for Cinema Addicts. And he's joining us next week on how Christianity, or how Christians, how congregations and individuals can use cinema, how to use films, and ways in which that all of that kind of thing might come alive for congregations. Now, I've just seen, Dorothy, thank you, the first live question is fed through. And I'll just read out Dorothy's question. This will be recorded, by the way, in the video broadcast. I'm just going to select this one, and it says, I read a lot of information. How does one figure out what or who to believe? There seem to be diverse opinions with everyone believing they are right. The Touchstone Roundup article is an example. Great question, Dorothy. It will be the question that we finish with, but let me just highlight the Touchstone article on Roundup. Max, you made mention of the public information network of the Methodist Church and how we should support their activities. They came out with a pretty strongly condemnatory thing on Roundup. And an independent scientist came back and made a comment in Touchstone. He thanked them for their environmental awareness, but they really did have the scientific facts very, very wrong. And I think that Dorothy is highlighting something that's important for us. On other occasions, the Public Information Network have made some claims, scientific claims that simply are not accurate. For example, they said once quite famously that as the Arctic polar caps melted, you know, the world's sea levels would rise. So it's like there are very well motivated people in terms of environmental awareness, but they're not necessarily very scientifically well read. So Dorothy's question has got a great deal of relevance. Who do we turn to? And I think in the Roundup case, she's highlighted exactly the particular problem. So, Max, you're part of a much wider network of engineers for social responsibility. I think I would want to turn to that wider group of engineers rather than to a church group talking about some of these matters. Any comment on that?
Well, I would suggest that local congregations can help the wider church organisations by feeding in the facts and helping them get it right, because I think most of the time they get it fairly right. So on the occasions where they have something wrong, the local congregations should be in there able to help them get it right, because I would expect politicians to listen more to the Public Questions Committee, for example, of the Methodist Church, than to a single congregation sitting in the North Shore of Auckland.
Good point, but would you expect the politicians to listen more to engineers for social responsibility?
On engineering issues, I would, but politicians would say, oh, they're engineers, what do they know about ecology? Politicians will twist the facts and the situation to their own convenience. So what I do see as a potential influence is the grouping of the different denominational ecological pressure groups, if you like, getting together, making sure they get their facts right, and saying, hey, we represent Christians in New Zealand, listen to us, because engineers for social responsibility gets pushed aside as a small pressure group.
Okay, that's a really helpful answer, Max. I would not necessarily think that the church has much of a voice these days in political matters. But equally, I'm not convinced that when Dorothy says that there are other things, you know, who do you go to? I certainly think that some of those pressure groups from the right wing that take a very, you know, I don't use the word climate change denier. Climate change occurs. It occurs in natural long-term cycles. The question is how much damage is done by human economic cycles now starting to intervene. And there, I think it would be a mistake if Christians did nothing because they might sometimes get it wrong. I think that's what you're saying, Max. I think that the public information network does lack credibility in a scientific sense, but it has credibility in a sense of we are Christians that are concerned about environmental matters. So to my way of thinking, it becomes vital that congregations do become involved. I think it's part and parcel of what it is to be Christian. Remember, those words are related: ecumenical, economy, and ecology. So, Dorothy, thank you for that. I think we've done answering that particular question now, and no other questions have come through. What I might do to help folk is to get Dorothy to just record how she, and we'll do a little podcast for you, a little video clip, how to get into the live question Q&A chat pod. So here we are. We've reached 7:40. That's the magic time. We'll draw this broadcast to a close, and I'm really looking forward to talking to Stuart McAdam next week on cinema addicts, and we'll have some other people in the panel then. Thank you, Stuart, for coming in at short notice to replace Mark, and thank you, Max. I don't know what the time is over there in the south of France, but it's great that you were able to be with us. Thank you both indeed, and good night, everyone.
Good night.